Welcome to CEO with Sophie. Just a quick note from me. If you like what you hear, go ahead and join the CEO Club right now by hitting that subscribe button. Not only will you never miss an episode, but you'll also be helping us out more than you know. Thank you and enjoy. Today's guest is a powerhouse in people strategy and a true champion of purpose driven leadership. Diane Sanford is the Chief People Officer at Unleash Brands, where she's redefining what it means to build a culture at scale. With over 25 years of HR expertise across fast growing companies and franchise networks, Diane has done it all. From talent acquisition to leadership development, with a deep commitment to empowering others. She's known for modernizing how teams grow, thrive, and stay, and for creating leadership programs that truly resonate across generations. Diane's also a fierce advocate for women in leadership, a tireless animal rescue volunteer, and let's be honest, the kind of HR leader everyone wishes they had. Get ready for a conversation packed with insights on scaling culture, leading with purpose, and why people-first strategy isn't just a buzzword, it's business imperative. Let's dive in with Diane Sanford. Hi, Diane. Welcome to the podcast today. It's so good to have you.
Thank you so much, Sophie. It's an honor to be with you today.
Yes, of course. It's really nice to speak to so many different people with different perspectives and different backgrounds. So I don't think I've had a chief people officer on yet. So this is going to be a good one. Yeah, you're the first.
Wow, I love
So
it.
this is going to be good. And I'm excited to hear about yourself. We were just talking about fostering because I just fostered a dog. I'm now just throwing that out there because that was something that we bonded on. And now I'm obsessed. So yeah, we'll probably talk about dogs at some point as well, just to warn everyone.
Very worthy topic.
It is. Yeah, it is. So let's dive in. Would love to get a little bit of a background to you, who you are. Yeah.
Yes, you gave my title. I'm a Chief People Officer, which is the top HR leader in an organization. I've been in HR for 30-ish years and have done pretty much everything under that umbrella. As Chief People Officer, my focus is on business results and blending people strategy with the strategy of the organization.
Nice. And I suppose as a chief people officer, there's loads of stuff that you can do within that role. But what would you say is a chief people officer to people who have no clue what that would be?
Yeah, I alluded to it just a second ago, but really it's being responsible for the people strategy, the overarching people strategy for an organization. And it's essentially helping the business get results through people. That means everything from creating a great hiring and onboarding experience through developing the talent that you have, through really paying attention to the work experience that you're providing to your employees to keep them engaged, make them feel empowered to drive performance, and most importantly, being the steward of the organization's culture. And, another piece of that is you create policies, programs, but it's bigger than that. It's helping leaders build teams that enjoy what they're doing and grow the kind of talent that delivers the results that the organization needs. So I often say, I'm part architect, part coach, part translator. So it's never dull and then every day is different. I love it.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I feel like it's such an integral role to an organization. I'd kind of explain it as, and there's a few roles that you could probably even say this for, but really like the glue for a business. You kind of piece everything together and everything always ends up coming back to you. And without realizing it, you're involved in every aspect. And it's so important because a business does come down to its culture at the end of the day. That's why people want to work there, and it's not
Mhm.
just about the work itself, although you can do some really cool stuff. And I don't know, you might be coding on something that's awesome or doing AI, that's great. But actually being in the right environment, I think sometimes trumps that, and you're responsible for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The environment that people spend most of their time in is critical to helping people bring their best selves to work, right? We want to support who they are entirely
Yeah.
so they feel free to think creatively, to work in a way that gives them satisfaction and helps the business. So you're right. The people aspect of it, it's interwoven into everything. And part of that is educating the other business leaders that it's more than just HR at a transactional level.
Yeah.
So it's continuously doing all the things that people expect, get your pay right, get your benefits right, and educating people that there's so much more to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And helping them understand what some of the processes are as well, that there
Right.
is processes in place.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you've led obviously people's strategy across both like corporate and franchise environments. What are some of the biggest shifts you've seen within the workforce?
You know, what I would say about that is what employees expect from the companies that they work for. And it's not simply generational, right? It's post pandemic. The pandemic fundamentally changed the paradigm with how people interact with their work. It People realized that work is a part of life, and so their expectations changed, their tolerance level changed, and they realized, hey, I enjoy having enough flexibility to be home when my kids get home from school or, do the other things in my life that I enjoy. And so as we move away from the pandemic, a lot of those fundamental beliefs have remained. So, for example, work is a part of life. So, work life integration is extremely important. I don't call it work life balance because I don't think there's such a thing, but I think being able to flex where you need to flex, workplace flexibility if I need to come in later, leave earlier to take care of the things I need to take care of. I want to work at a place that accommodates that. I expect my company to be my community, and I expect to be able to learn from my leaders. I have a higher bar for what I expect from my leaders. And I also expect you to care about my career as much as I do. So it's not just, it's gone beyond the transaction of I show up to work, I do a job, and I leave.
I would agree. I see that more and more. Definitely around the expectations of people's like the leaders nowadays.
Uh huh.
There's more expectations on you, and also not even just from a managerial standpoint or being a leader within an organization, but a leader just in general. I think that there's a lot of people that come to you for just general support or how do I integrate my life better? And they want you to become more of a coach rather than just a pure leader now. I don't know if you've seen that as well.
I absolutely have. Adulting has not gotten easier. And so as people continue to manage and adjust to all the things that they're required to deal with budgeting, financial pressure, changing apartments, adopting children, adopting a dog or a cat, all of the things, aging parents, little children, finding daycare, they expect their employer to acknowledge that those things are difficult and that the employer is going to give them some grace. And so my role is to make sure we listen with empathy and make the adjustments that we can make for the people who work so hard for us. There are some things we can't do. We can't do everything, but to the degree that we can work with folks to better support them so that they can take care of what they need to take care of and then focus on work, then we absolutely should be considering all of those things.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, over the years, I've seen that more and more. I've been someone who is like, yeah, I'm just going to go work, do what I need to do.
Yeah.
I'm very much like my personal life, my work life has been separate. And then I think over the past few years, I've realized like it does kind of blend, especially when you're moving countries and things like that. You go through some struggles, and it's like you need the business to support you and help you with a lot of that. But
Uh-huh.
how do you? Because I think there's a fine balance, or there's a challenge where companies will say that we back you, we'll look after you, we'll make sure that you're supported. Yet the actions aren't necessarily there. How do you get around that? Or are they actually backing these people? Or is it just talk? What do you think?
Wow, that's a really good question and so critically important. Leadership behaviors have to match the words and the promises that the company makes to new employees, to existing employees. And that comes down to culture. So, culture is leader led, right? So, anything you say that your company stands for, any promise you make from an employer branding perspective, your leaders need to be bought in to all of those words and understand the behaviors that support the core values, the promises. Because if there's a gap in that, people will pay attention to the leader's behavior and not the words that are written. So, your culture is really how people think and act. It isn't necessarily the words on a page or the words on a wall. So, a lot of very intentional thinking needs to go into the things that you're talking about. If we're going to say to our employees, hey, we have a flexible environment, we support your whole life, we want you to be able to flex your schedule, come in late for if you have a doctor's appointment, leave early for your kid's soccer game, then we better behave in a way that supports those behaviors. And if you don't, that's critical. People will figure it out very quickly
Yeah.
and you'll have a very high turnover rate if you're promising one thing yet delivering another. It's very, very critical.
Yeah, I agree. And over the years, obviously, I think we've all probably seen it firsthand in businesses where that's been the case, and it's very difficult. And I do think, as much as we can talk about it and say we're going to do X, Y, and Z, the proof's in the pudding, right? We have to,
Yes.
put our best forward, and we have to, like you say, be doing it ourselves, and actions, actions, actions. And then if we take it outside of the work environment, it's the same when you have a dog or if you have children, it's all around your actions or your relationships rather than it is around words. Words are great, but you have to be consistent and see through what you say you're going to do, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the bigger challenges with organizational culture,
Mm,
the value proposition for employees is sometimes the top leadership is very aligned and supportive around stated mission and values.
mm,
Sometimes you'll have a department leader whose behavior is different.
right.
And so, really addressing that very quickly to make sure everybody has a consistent and equitable experience builds trust and credibility with your workforce. Everybody understands there's going to be an outlier at some point,
Yeah.
and it's how you react and address those outlier situations when somebody brings them to your attention, how quickly you react, how you've addressed it, if you've resolved the issue in a fair way,
Yeah.
making sure there's no retribution or retaliation. Those things become stories within your organization, and the stories live on regardless of who works there. It's very funny how stories become like folklore,
Yeah.
and then that becomes part of the employee experience, whether they had the experience directly or they heard about something that happened before.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. There's a lot of psychology involved in that.
Yeah. And actually, I've never thought about that, but now I'm thinking about stories I've heard from businesses that I've been at and things like that. And it can help setting expectations and helping with the culture in some aspects, but then it also can really hinder it as well. So
Right.
yeah, it's a tough
Yeah,
one.
culture is a living, breathing thing. You have one whether you manage it or not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so paying attention to it, caring
Mm.
how it's being represented and caring about the experience that people are having is one of the things that has become very important to me over time. In the businesses that I've worked for, I grew up in hospitality, so restaurants, retail, and I came to believe early on that your guest or your customer is never going to have a better experience than the one you create for your employees. So creating a great experience for your employees, making them feel empowered, making them feel cared about and valued, then gives them a sense of confidence
Yeah.
and a level of care about the product or the environment they're creating for the guest. Super critical.
Yeah. Yeah. And just treating people like, I suppose, human beings, how you would want to be treated. Yeah.
Yes. Everything you need to know about people you learn sort of in kindergarten, right? Share, communicate, treat people well, don't steal their supplies, all those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lots of it's not a lot of it isn't more complicated than that.
No, but you do have to be thoughtful and think about these things and how
Yeah.
other people will perceive whatever you're doing or yourself in certain situations. And I think that's what can make a good leader. And, we'll talk about this actually because you've built like the leadership development programs, right?
Yes.
So would love to just hear a little bit more around that and what you think makes a good leadership program and effective today anyway, because it's probably changed over the years. So nowadays, what do we have to think about within leadership?
Yeah. Um, from my perspective, you really have to be intentional. And a lot of times talent doesn't rise on its own in every environment. And
Mm.
so you need to have the systems that identify potential, provide sponsorship. So creating an environment where mentoring is encouraged and happens naturally and through supported programs. And you have to understand what the barriers are to growth, just whether that's how workflow is set up, workloads are designed, etc. But in terms of the evolution of learning and development or professional development programs that companies own, it used to just be training on hard skills. This is how you make a better widget and you progress to widget maker level 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Now it's much more around the soft skills, how to work with difficult people, how to resolve conflict, how to respond, not just react. At the same time as you're helping people get hands on practice, whether that's through a program, through a workshop, on developing leadership skills. So, how do I influence other people across the organization without positional authority? So I'm an individual contributor. I still have to sell ideas, communicate cross functionally. And the further we get into relying on technology, interacting with AI chatbots,
Yeah.
texting instead of calling, virtual meetings instead of meeting in person,
Yeah.
the less we have the opportunity to practice interpersonal skills,
Mhm.
body language cues, those types of things. And so, if you're going to build an impactful leadership program, you should touch on those things too.
Yeah. I think definitely in this day and age and the amount of conversations I've had, we actually did a podcast that was all around like emotional intelligence and the power of it, especially now we've got
Yes,
AI that's coming in. That's going to be a skill that you need to lean upon. It's the stuff that these machines don't necessarily have, which I think we go back
right,
even 10 years, it was like you say, okay, how are we building X? Or, it was very, I suppose, matter of fact rather than thinking about that softer skills, which I think
right,
the soft skills can really create a good or a really good leader. I think about the leaders that I've had that have good soft skills. I'm like, okay, they're probably some of the better leaders that I've personally had. But do you think that's natural though? Do you think like the soft skills is something that you either have or you don't? And same with like that leadership quality. Do you think people are either leaders or they're not?
That's such a good question. I think some people are naturally acclimated to being empathetic leaders who get the best out of their folks through influence, sponsorship, and mentoring. I don't think it comes naturally to everyone. And I think you can learn to be a better active listener, to be more thoughtful in making sure you're having regular one-on-ones with your folks, staying connected, asking good questions, being an active listener, asking good questions, and then really listening to what your folks are telling you and making change as a result. You can learn that. You have to want to. They have to want to. There is a small percentage of people who you can have a conversation like this with, and they'll nod and hear everything, pretend to hear everything you say, and not change one iota of their approach to interacting with other people. Most people want to do well. They want to do a good job and they want to be the best they can be. And those are the people who, if afforded the opportunity and access to a good coach, a different way of thinking, will incorporate the things that resonate for them and grow as a leader. So I think some people will naturally be better at it, but I think you can learn a lot of the real essential things if you want to.
Yeah, I like that. I agree with that. I think it is down to if you want to. You can do anything if you really want to do it. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. It comes from a sense, a place of, hey, I'm confident in what I know, but I know I don't know everything and I'm willing to learn.
yeah,
So a desire to continuously be better,
yeah,
a continuous learner will make a better leader over time,
yeah, yeah,
I
definitely.
think.
Yeah, I do think that the leadership piece. Obviously, I speak to many people that are in C-suite positions, and they are leaders, and it's fantastic. But it's not for everyone. Not everyone has to be a leader, and that's okay. And you might naturally be inclined to be a leader. I mean, I was bossy as a kid, so I knew I'd probably be a leader in some form. Yeah, because that's just me. I'm not that bossy anymore. I've had some coaching. So we've kind of channeled it a different way. But yes, sometimes you just know that that's what you're set up to do. And other times if you're unsure, trial it, but you don't have to do it. And I think throughout your career, if you do want to be a leader, like definitely try to learn and develop skills. Not everyone's a good leader and not everyone knows everything. I definitely don't. So definitely do some courses.
The hardest thing for new leaders and
Mm,
sometimes even seasoned leaders to deal with is having to make an unpopular decision. And you realize that you're not going to be able to make everybody happy
mhm.
all the time. In fact, you probably won't ever be able to make everybody happy all the time. So you have to feel comfortable with your decision making process and be okay with some people being unhappy with your decisions. The key is you should be explaining the why behind your decision. Most people can accept any decision, not necessarily agree with it, but accept it and understand it if they understand the thought process behind the
Yeah.
decision and the why the decision was made. And as a leader, especially if you're going to want to be a senior leader, you have to understand that you should be comfortable being respected, but not always liked.
That's a good one there. Yeah. It's true though. It's true. And yeah, like you say, especially at that senior level, yeah, you're gonna have to do some things and make some decisions that are for the business, not for necessarily the people.
Yeah, I mean, I think I always strive for a balance,
Yeah.
right? What's the right decision for the person and what's the right
Yeah.
decision for the business? Usually there's some common ground there. but there isn't a person who loves not knowing the why. So if you can explain the why, they may not agree with you, but at least they can start to think through, okay, well, that was their reasoning. I don't really like it, but I get it.
Also, I think it can help them as well. I mean, I've had it in my career where someone's explained a thing and then I have gone away and thought about it and was like, "Oh, that's actually a really good point. I haven't thought about it from that sense, from a, like
Yeah.
a business perspective." And I think
Yeah.
I've seen it, and there's definitely some times, even recently, where I'm having conversations with people, and it's very much they can just see their world and they're not seeing like the wider business perspective. And I think if I just explained the why, then they might go, "Oh yeah, that's actually a good point. Let me think about it from a different perspective." But people
Mhm.
don't. They just get wrapped up in that.
Yeah. I found listening and then asking questions help me understand sort of why you think that, and sort of drawing their beliefs out through questions and presenting a different perspective versus just sometimes coming straight at people with
Mm,
an argument is
yeah.
much more effective in bringing people along with a different point of view. There's a group of people that it wouldn't matter,
Yeah.
but for most people, I found, hey, was that the result you wanted to get? Was that the consequence or the outcome you expected when you said X, Y, or Z? What were you trying to accomplish? And helping people take a step back, think through things. Again, just this last couple of years, I've become very focused on differentiating between reaction and response,
Yeah.
because reaction is full of emotion and passion is great for driving big projects and garnering people's commitment. It's not always good in the heat of the moment and resolving differences. And so a really good leader in my mind is somebody who, you're going to have emotions, right? But somebody who can moderate their emotions so that they de-escalate a situation versus making it worse.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised that people you wouldn't expect to, because of their, I've worked with PhDs, I've worked with people with multiple degrees who have no clue how to truly work through conflict and bring people along. So it is something you've got to learn to do and be mindful about.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of learning around obviously being a leader. Like we've just touched upon some aspects there, but it's just a continuous journey. But it's also the thing that I have to keep reminding myself, because like I say, I've done a lot of like leadership training over the years,
Yeah.
is that piece around like the reacting. Is if something happens, I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna have to stop for a minute and I'll come back to it. I can't necessarily make decisions or reply to something straight away because I know that I might react. And that's something that I have to keep reminding myself is like, don't react to situations, take a step back and then find a response that's valid.
Yeah, it's a continuous learning journey,
Yeah.
right? It's not something you learn and then you forever
Yeah.
never again respond emotionally. That that's not what it's like. At least not in my experience. It's continuous, every week, every day. It's just self-talk, right? How do I want to show up today? And if you start with that, you become much more intentional, and you reduce the number of times that you're surprised by your own behavior and the times you say to yourself, wish I hadn't done that.
Yeah. We've all been there.
We've all been there. Yes, ma'am.
We have something I wanted to speak to you about. Obviously, I'm in the world of recruitment, and I'm sure a few people that listen to this, while they're leaders, they'll be hiring and vice versa in recruitment. What's your advice around retention and engagement within businesses? How do we keep people engaged? I mean, we've kind of touched upon a lot of aspects there, but is there anything else you can think of that's worth mentioning?
The one thing that I would say is companies are increasingly becoming leaner. And that means everyone, regardless of the role you play, has more projects, is busier, and it's so easy to get tunnel vision about getting your checklist done. Organizations really need to take the time to build ways to get feedback from their employees. So, common things are doing focus groups, roundtables, formal surveys. Another thing that a lot of companies don't do that's pretty effective is to reach out to your tenured employees and do a stay interview. What is it about working here that keeps you here? What do you appreciate? What could we do better? And then sort of aggregating the themes, figuring out what's actionable, and responding to the feedback that you're getting. And you have to be very purposeful about responding. So, in terms of retention, the baseline is you've got to make sure that you're competitive and providing the same sort of platforms and programs, competitive pay and benefits, all those basic things with the other companies that are competing for talent with you. So, first, it's about the basic programs. Second, it's really about listening and responding to the feedback. An HR, a CPO is an internal marketer. And so the way in which we communicate with employees is as critical as communicating with customers, having communication plans for all the things, being purposeful about them, tying your actions back to the feedback you got so that you get credit for listening is very, very important. Even the farther away you get from, let's say, an engagement survey. Hey, 6 months ago in our survey, this was one of the things that you told us was important. We want to remind you that we heard that. And so we're doing X, Y, and Z. Hopefully you'll respond quicker than 6 months to all the feedback. But as you can't do everything instantaneously. So there'll be a few quick hit things. And then you'll continue to layer things in, but don't keep that to yourself. Showing people that their voice matters. I think in this world of all the macro things that are
Yeah.
going on, being heard, getting a response, super critical in that part of the employee-employer relationship.
Yeah, I agree. The feedback piece is very relevant. And especially if you're going to go back and say, hey, guys, you told us you wanted this. We're now doing this. We're now bringing in a ping pong table because you asked us to bring in a ping pong table. If you don't like it, I don't want to hear about it. At least you
You know,
tried.
it's almost better to not ask if you're not going to do anything with the feedback. The worst thing you can do is ask for somebody's feedback and
Yeah.
then do nothing with it.
Yeah.
Right? It's like even on a personal interpersonal level, don't ask for my advice if you're not going to do anything with it. And so honoring the time somebody takes to share their perspective with you is critical. But retaining talent right now, it's a complex web of small pieces of a larger puzzle, right? The values connecting to a bigger purpose, making sure they know where they fit, getting paid competitively, honoring their professional development, accepting that a lot of people have a job with you and something else outside of work that they're passionate about is also important, right? If I had somebody who wanted to start a podcast, as long as it wasn't a conflict of interest, why would I care? Really
Yeah.
fortunate, especially with the leaders that I've worked with, especially where I'm at now at Unleashed Brands. We really do care about what our employees are telling us. And we have to listen because we're a fast paced entrepreneurial organization. And we don't, in those environments, there is a lot of change. And so helping people through the change curve when we're moving very fast, you really have to be purposeful about that. And I'm fortunate to have some colleagues who agree with bringing people along. So
Yeah.
as a CPO, You look for leaders who are philosophically aligned with you and who care about the people who work in the business. And I'm very blessed to have that now and to have had that in my career.
And I think the change management piece is really important, and that gets overlooked, the communication and managing the different changes that are gonna happen.
Yeah, and we're not 100% perfect at it every single time, and we get feedback and we say, okay, well, we'll remember that next time, recognizing that pride and your ego need to be set aside so that you can get the best and highest good for the organization and for your people, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree with that. And a question I have for you as well, just because I'm curious, because you're gonna see it from a different side, because a lot of the people I speak with obviously are actually on the technology side, and you're within the HR piece. Is there anything that you see around women that are in leadership roles, and anything that would help us progress, or the growth into a leadership role that we're not necessarily doing? Just, yeah, what do you see from your side?
I am particularly passionate about helping women leaders excel. And my point of view on this, I'm the youngest of four daughters. I struggled to grow my career as a female leader in
Yeah.
really male dominated environments. And so, what I would say to women who I mentor is there is a component of self confidence that needs to be trusted, right? So, and you can fake self confidence. It's really about finding one thing you're confident about. Hey, and it doesn't have to be related to work, but how you show up, you need to show up appearing to be confident in your point of view and recognize and understand the differences in gender speak. Interrupt more. I'm not telling you anything you probably don't know or haven't experienced, but men interrupt more in meetings. They'll repeat what you say like it's their idea. And having the confidence as a woman to professionally, respectfully tell people, hey, just a moment, I'm not finished. Let me finish and we'll address your question. Navigating gender speak as you move up, getting exposure to and invited to the meetings where real decisions are made require you to have a sponsor, formally or informally. So you need to learn to maximize your relationships, have the confidence to ask the question. If you've got that question as a smart professional woman, everybody has that question. Ask the question and believe that you can do the work because you can, right? What I've noticed in the different genders is men will apply to a position having 50% of the qualifications and think,
Yeah.
oh, I can do that. Women won't apply unless they are confident that they have all of the experiences
Yeah.
required and then some. So understand that there's that gender difference and don't be intimidated by it. Leverage your female leaders, recruit them as mentors, and don't second guess yourself so much because women tend to do that much more so than men, in my experience.
We do. I do, and I know a lot of women that do. I have a lot of friends that are obviously female leaders, and the amount of times they'll text me or call me and like ask me stuff before they even go out to these meetings, and they're like, "Oh, should I have said this? Should I have done that?" I've sat in a boardroom with women, and they come out after going, "Oh, did I say this right, or did I do this wrong?" And it's like, guys don't second guess themselves. They are quite happy.
It's the subliminal messages women received as they grew up. There is a book that I often reference that I read when my daughter was 10, 11, called Raising Ophelia. And it talked about the decline in girls' self confidence once they hit junior high. And up until that point, boys and girls have the same level of self confidence. But once they get to junior high, lots of things fall into place to erode that. And we don't grow out of that without help from mentors, counseling, coaching, really analyzing our internal beliefs and being comfortable with taking a risk. Taking a risk can be being the only one to ask a question in a meeting. Taking a risk can be throwing your idea out there boldly
Mm.
when the other people in the room have already, moved past it. So being comfortable with risk, being confident in yourself, and leveraging relationships to make sure you're getting feedback and coaching and you understand sort of the context of the room,
Yeah.
super important.
Yeah. And I just want to go back actually to the gender talk that you mentioned, because I've seen that more and more in my career. If I see how some of my peers that are men speak compared to maybe how I am, I mean, I've definitely become a lot more assertive, which is good, but I don't necessarily feel that I am. I mean, I'm definitely not as educated as some of them. So when they talk about stuff, it sounds a bit fancy compared to how I'd say it. So that's something that I'm like, I wish I could articulate myself better, but we're working on it. But I do think that is a really good point that no one thinks about.
Men take up, so next time you're in a meeting, pay attention to around the table the amount of space women take up versus men take up. Women shrink and make themselves smaller, put all their notebook, their laptop in a small space so as to not inconvenience other people. Men spread all their stuff out. So what I started to do when I realized that was I took up a little bit more space. I would spread my things out. I would adopt some of the behavioral things that I saw men do, and it sends subconscious signals, right? So pay attention to that and start to move in the direction of appearing to be more confident, holding your shoulders back, the distance between your shoulders and your ears. Confident people, you know, sit more like that. If you're nervous, you tend to scrunch up like that.
Yeah.
Somebody else that I've been following, Vanessa Van Edwards. She's a behavioral scientist. She's written a couple of books about this type of stuff. Fascinating, super helpful.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I'll have to look at that. I have to say though, I definitely spread my stuff out, not necessarily in meetings, but just in the office. Like I have my bag over there, I have my jacket over there. I tend to have like 3 or 4 desks. Yeah, I'm going to keep doing that then. This has been actually really useful for me, especially, and I think there's a lot of great little bits in there that I'll take away. And I think it's worth definitely researching more into like leadership, coaching, and the behavioral side of things, emotional intelligence, all the soft skills is basically what we're talking about here that is worth us looking into, right?
I think so. One of my favorite quotes is by Maya Angelou. And essentially it is people won't remember what you say, but they'll remember how you make them feel. And so my goal is to always leave a conversation better than I found it, to find a way to, whether, regardless of the message I'm delivering, whether it's, constructive coaching or a negative, what you could call a negative conversation, it's to make sure that people feel respected. And that's a critical piece of what I think of truly as a good leader.
Yeah. I think that also goes for inside and outside of work, though, right?
1,000%.
Yeah.
1,000%.
It's all the same. I'm going to ask you one more question, which you might have kind of answered already. But this is our closing tradition, which is what's one piece of advice you'd give your younger self?
I love this question. I would tell myself, Diane, you don't have to have all the answers. Just understand it's okay to say, I don't know, and ask the questions. Um, Early on, I thought credibility came from proving myself, putting my head down, and just working hard.
Yeah.
And over time, I've really learned it comes from listening, learning, and building trust. And so It's okay to not be perfect, is what I would tell myself.
Oh, I love that. That's such a good one. And I completely agree. And you don't have to know all the answers. And now I'm going to talk quickly about my foster dog because I didn't know anything and I just Googled everything and he's still alive. He's awesome and he's going to be adopted. So,
Tremendous. I told you off camera, I commend you because I am a foster fail. I could not successfully get a dog adopted because I would never give them, I would adopt them myself. So,
yeah,
congratulations on that. That's
thank you.
amazing.
Yeah, I nearly did keep him, but he's 60 pounds and I live in Manhattan. So that's not going to happen. Perfect. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking the time today. It's been a great conversation, and I will definitely be speaking to you very soon again.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sophie. It's been wonderful.